The one thing that it can't predict, though, and there's no disclaimer at the bottom of our financial plans that say your future is entirely dependent upon your monthly market timing, because then all the algorithms get thrown off. And so what we are factoring in, though, are corrections every year. What we can't figure in is if we get in, get out, get in, get out, get in, get out, because then the giant disclaimer is going to be your entire retirement future is based upon your ability to guess. And whatever CNBC analyst you might have seen on that day got you out, and whoever got you back in, that's what makes the predictions much harder, and that's what can really disrupt the plan. You know, the one thing that I know we all get is, how much lower could this go? You know, I mean, even some of the people that are so unbelievably scared, you know, we even get some of the questions like, I mean, could this just all go to zero? You know, are we just gambling with our money? Could this just all go to nowhere? And, you know, I'm gonna pull up a couple of these, but then I think Adam would be wise to explain, you know, we discussed about marketable securities, and I think that might explain it for a minute. But when I've got some folks that are really truly scared about everything from, you know, the possibilities of depression or World War III, or just, you know, can't see tomorrow, I try to explain to them, could everything go to zero? I guess if we want to split that fork in the road, theoretically it could. And here's what would have to happen: either complete global nuclear holocaust or meteor, meaning that you're gone. And if we're all gone from this earth, whatever afterlife you might believe in, I'm sure you're not gonna be worried about your Schwab account. And so if we go down the other side of the road, we would have to look at it in order for everything really to go to zero and not return. Every company that you see on this screen right now, which are the largest companies in the United States, from Apple to Google, Johnson & Johnson, you know, Exxon, Procter & Gamble, JP Morgan, Visa, Chevron, MasterCard. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Every single one of these companies have to go bankrupt on the same day.
What is this list? What is this list? Is this the S&P 500?
These are the top holdings within the S&P 500. So This is basically what makes up, quote, quote, the stock market that you see on the news each day. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they're feeling some pressure. They might have gone up a little bit too much last year. Now they're coming back down a little bit more this year. But Adam, explain for this, if you would, why this is so relevant and why people worry about this, whereas they're not so worried about, you know, the painting hanging in their house or the value of their home in general, or a car or an old
I think
coin.
It's important to understand, you know, what we do and what we invest in and why it's valuable. So what we do, although people think of stocks and bonds traditionally, we invest in marketable securities. And by definition, the definition of marketable security is there's a market made. In other words, you know the price of that security, and you can turn that security into cash within a very short time window, a day or two, at any given time. So you own a share of Apple anywhere in the world, you know what the value of that security is daily. And so all the investments we have for clients are marketable securities, like Jason mentioned, different from a piece of real estate, your personal residence, your art collection, your jewelry, on and on and on. I mean, lots of different types of investments. You could be doing other types of investments where they're not hard, like first trust deeds, where you have a deed on a property, or where you've made a loan sharking, basically is what you're doing in an organized fashion. But those aren't marketable. So, you know, you go to sell your house, everyone's familiar with that. You got to find a buyer. There's no market made for that. You don't know what the value of your house is every day. You got to go find a buyer, and then you got to turn it to cash, and that takes time. If you got a nice piece of jewelry, you really don't know what the value is. You know what you paid for it. You know what the value is today. And if you need to turn it to cash, then you got to find a buyer. And typically, the other thing that is not mentioned,
we call that getting a bid, right? You got to get a bid.
Got to get a bid. And the other thing that's not mentioned is it costs you. I mean, you know what it costs you to sell your house. I mean, 4 or 5, 6% to sell your house. Marketable securities in our world doesn't cost you anything to turn it, to cash. So that's the real value. But the downside is the same thing. They're marketable. So you know the value every day, and you watch the value. And even though you may not want to sell your house, if you watch the value of it go down every day as real estate prices depressed, that might get you pretty worried. If you paid $400 and it's worth $300, 6 months later, that might panic you, but you just don't see it the same way you see marketable securities. Because in order for our stuff to be able to be turned to cash, you got to have a value constantly, at least daily. So,
and that leads to the panic too, right? I mean, all the clients are constantly seeing the marketable securities price all day. They turn on the TV and it's the red across the screen and the sensation of panic, market crashes, market tanks, and you're seeing the flashing constant red screen. You don't see that on a house or car or jewelry. You don't see, what your house is worth by the minute or by the hour or by the day, And so I think that goes to the marketable security part, that when it's daily and readily available, it stays front and center more than the physical assets that may not, get priced constantly.
So the biggest value, and I should have, I kind of beat around the bush on it, but it's liquidity. Mm-hmm. Liquidity is your greatest value in what we do and why we have clients' assets, because people want to be invested, they want to make money, they want to reach their financial goals, but at the same time, you don't know what's around the corner. I mean, lives change, things change. We've all had clients that had a certain plan, and something happened, whether it was tragic or in a positive way. Things change, and so we value liquidity. And again, that's your whole marketable security advantage, but it's also a disadvantage.
Well, and that goes hand in hand with, like you mentioned, planning. I mean, that's really the basis of what we do. So some clients we know are built for longer runs, where maybe they can have more aggressive investments, and some need a lot of their money in a shorter time frame. So those two clients that I just described are going to be invested completely differently. Wouldn't you say, Kyle?
100%. I mean, we've always talked about in this office and with clients a lot is that, you try to have money that's set aside, whatever your time frame is. If you're retiring today, tomorrow, or in 20 years, clients live a lot longer than they did before, right? So, I mean, it's not like you work to 62 and you die at 70 usually with a pension. It's you have to have a plan in place, and that's a lot of what we do is building those plans. But part of that is also making sure that, the money that you're using today is money that's less at risk, meaning that it's in the fixed income or cash, even, 6 months, 8 months worth of reserve cash for your spending, while the money that's later in retirement is more at risk and, trying to grow to offset that, that purchasing power, that gets depreciated with inflation. So 100%. Yeah. It's usually changes how we invest things for the short term as well as for the long term and for each client.
I want to piggyback that real quick, Kyle, because one thing, the common question we get too is it different this time? And when it comes to the financial planning, and then, I would urge my clients speak to me, your clients speak to you, because the one thing that I want to remind everybody is that within the goals, within the financial plans that we create, what you're going through right now, we didn't know what headline would cause it, but we're familiar with the drawdowns, and those are absolutely expected. In the screen that I've got up right now, what I try to explain to clients quite often is how normal this is, albeit the headline might be different, but humans react the same. We get excited when we get excited, we get fearful, we get greedy. Those emotions have been around as long as we've been around. And so what you're looking at right now, these are annual drawdown returns. And so this data here is going back almost 100 years. And this data is what feeds our financial planning. And so the stock market never goes up 365 days a year. It corrects every single year, and it is corrected 100 years in a row. Every single year it's had a correction, and that average correction is right around 13%. And so we've gone a little bit beyond that now, but I wouldn't say what we're going through right now is really abnormal. There's been many other times before that it's corrected worse, but the story really behind the story here is that even though the market has had a correction 100 years in a row, the depth of that correction every single year is give or take, mid-teens. The market has still had a compound average, 7, 8, 9% that has got people to their goals. And so when we do financial planning in the simulations and the algorithms that are running within the plan, it's expecting this. The one thing that it can't predict, though, and there's no disclaimer at the bottom of our financial plans that say your future is entirely dependent upon your monthly market timing, because then all the algorithms get thrown off. And so what we are factoring in, though, are corrections every year. What we can't figure in is if we get in, get out, get in, get out, get in, get out, because then the giant disclaimer is going to be your entire retirement future is based upon your ability to guess. And whatever CNBC analyst you might have seen on that day got you out, and whoever got you back in, that's what makes the predictions much harder, and that's what can really disrupt the plan. But I just want to kind of make the point that we plan for this, that we expect this. We just don't know what will cause it.
Well, that similar to a slide I got up here too, that I show quite a bit in meetings here with clients, Jason, but it not just the declines that we experience, but in the frequency, but it also doesn't necessarily dictate where things are going to finish the year either. Right. And so if you go back, this slide goes back to 1980, and the orange on it is essentially the drawdowns intra-year. And then the top side of it is where the year finishes. I mean, obviously years like 2008, we were down, 49%. And where did we finish? Yeah, down 38. It doesn't mean everything always comes back. But there's a lot of times, you look at 2009, we were down 28% at one point, finished up 23. 2020, our most recent, right, with March there, with the lockdowns and COVID and market drops 34%, we finished the year up 20 or 16, excuse me. So again, that doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to come back today or tomorrow, but it does show that these are very common and built into our software and our financial planning. And as you said, the one thing that it can't predict or is and account for is emotion, right?